law in the future. And at the European level, we have also a process which starts months ago, and we hope that till the end of the year, we have a draft proposal from the EU Commissioner for Justice. And we can also see that we have other developments in other countries where laws or where laws actually being introduced. And however, during today's book launch, I'm looking forward to hear more about the fight of the victims to gain justice and to discuss the concrete case of the Ali Ennterprise tragedy and the fight of the victims afterwards. And I'm really pleased that we have the opportunity to discuss these issues with today's panelists from Pakistan. And I would like to thank, first of all, our partner ECCHR for the good cooperation, but also for all participants from Pakistan to make this conference or the book launch possible. And yeah, I wanted also to thank the technical moderation, Leah. If you have any questions, please let us know within the chat. And also to my colleague Katarina, who supports us very much to make this happen. And before I hand over to Per Zumbansen, who will guide us through the event today, I have 4 technical information. I hope everybody is now in the English channel so that you can listen to us. And it's also important because Saeeda from Pakistan, she will speak in Urdu. So this is why we have to choose the English channel to understand her. The second is please put your microphone on mute. And the third one is question and comments. Please put them into the chat. Per Zumbansen, he will look after them and he will actually get back to the comments and questions. And please, the last information is that we will record this event and we will put that online after the book launch. So yes, thank you very much for your attention. And now, Per, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I actually don't have the floor. The floor is really today exactly only given for those that are involved and have been involved in the very important work that is part of the aftermath of the tragic event on the 11th of September in 2012. And I'm a professor at McGill University in Montreal, and I consider myself in many ways very removed and far from the actual reality of that we try to speak about today. And I want to highlight that in a world where we are overwhelmed by social media driven news of terrible things going on all the time, especially after these past 18, 20 months, it's often difficult to imagine where one's own role is and what one could contribute. And as an academic, I think it's very important to recognize that one's contribution is often very limited because one tries to inspire ideas of social engagement and commitment within the classroom, but often one feels that, that's very limited. And so this project now that I am honored to accompany a little from my side is rare in the sense that it gives voice to those people that have been involved in the event itself and in trying to make the event a transformative one in terms of educating people that buy consumer goods and know very little where they come from, people that are accustomed to a welfare state of various forms and take things for granted, such as being able to go to the hospital or being able to have access to justice and being able to rely on certain social protective features, or to be able to look back at a particular history that's very, very narrow and contingent, that tells us that people have fought for a long time for working safely in a factory. And to realize again and again, almost on a daily basis, that that is far from being universal. And that realization is often a privilege for people in the global north, and they then try to show how they act in solidarity with those that do not benefit from such standards, but often enough we don't know how to better contribute. And so whether it's a book or whether it's international collaboration, often these things really only live from an ongoing and constant and almost daily engagement with trying to create bridges and dialogues. And so one part that's very, very crucial is to see a book as just one little tip of an iceberg of a collaboration that some of the people, including Federica Boll at the FES and her colleagues, Miriam, Saage-Maaß at the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights in Berlin, and our colleagues from Pakistan have been doing, along with others that so often remain in the shadow, because they're never on the evening news. On the evening news, we find a short glimpse, for example, of the most recent fire in Karachi on August 27th, and that flashes across our screen and then it's gone. And the ongoing work that our colleagues have been doing to give voice to those people that try to change conditions on the ground and to garner international support is really, really important and valuable. So a book launch is sort of an academic event. This one we try to make a little less academic by having people speak to us that have been involved in not writing a book and articles, but in what we call and what has become known as transnational legal activism. And transnational legal activism is crucial because it is going beyond and outside of the traditional realms of trying to build a litigation, bring it to court, and then sit and hope for a good outcome. Transnational legal activism is crucial because it is a way of social campaigning, of coalition building, of law reform and norm reform on the ground, of political pressure exercise and solidarity building across borders. And once one realizes that the frontiers of such an engagement are actually very, very open, it becomes a project that anybody could join. And I think that's really an important element that makes it that it's not only lawyers who participate, but it's literally a civil society engagement. But it's not a civil society engagement that is local, but it can be transnational if people across the world join. So it is my very, very great honor today to welcome a number of panelists to give us a bit of an insight into the significance of the event, their own role in trying to make changes and to pressure for changes after the tragic event, and to also remind us of what the obstacles are, but also what the opportunities are to get started. And I just mentioned the fire on the 27th of August. Reading a short news story about this is devastatingly sobering, because some of the similar things happened just almost as if nothing had changed. Again, windows were barred, exits were blocked. And one just wonders, why would that be? Why is it not possible? If there is an accident in a 3-story building, why is it impossible to leave the building through the openings that should be there and that have been architecturally put in there? And so I will now invite our first panelist, Saeeda Khatoon, to speak to us about the significance of the event. And Saeeda, I'm very, very grateful, as we all are, that you make time today to participate. And let me say, we are eager to listen to you and to learn from you. But in my role as moderator, and I tell that to everybody, I will try to signal to you at some point after a few minutes that we pass it on to the next speaker, so that we have 2 rounds of comments from the panelists and enough time to field questions from the audience, because now many people from around the world are joining our event today, and they all have questions for you. So it's important that you understand that they really want to learn from you. Oh, okay, so Saeeda Khatoon is speaking for the Ali Ennterprise Affectees Association, in which she has played a pivotal role in launching it. And she will speak about the significance of the day. And if you would be so kind to explain a little of what it meant to create the association and what you see its role has been and can be in going forward, we would be most grateful. Saeeda, over to you.
तंजीम बनाने में कुछ तो फायदा हुई।
we were quite perturbed by the incident, and we were going door to door to gain justice. But after we created the our association so that we could get united, and after that we started a collective struggle. And we understand that because of without this association, we cannot like move forward in a better way. And we have so far the justice we have gotten. It's because of this association and those who have supported us throughout the struggle. There were a lot of problems, but still we continue to move forward in the right direction, and we have and what was your the other question?
I think it would be really good to know, to understand a little of how exactly the association works. How does it put forward proposals for change? How does it create a platform for people coming together and to campaign for better working safety conditions?
हमारी एसोसिएशन काम इस तरीके से होती है जे
Our organization works like we hold meetings.
इस पर एसोसिएशन बनाने में हमारी यानी कि एनडीएफ का
And we hold meetings on different issues, and NTUF has played a very important role in supporting us. They like educated us how to run an organization, and it was Nasir who persuaded us to create this organization. And since then, every step we take in the forward direction, we do it after consultation with our members. We hold meetings in our communities, in our offices. Sometimes there are a few people involved in it. Sometimes it's a general body meeting in which all the members from those bereaved 260 families that were perished in the Ali Enterprise fire take place, and we all like consult over what lies ahead, over what problems we are facing, and how can we go for a better outcome. So this is how we are going. So although there are sometimes there are two people, four people, five people, so sometimes there are like 300 people. So we are going forward, and it's been going like we have been involved with ILO and with other organizations, and we put our recommendations for them in what they have been doing for the global legislation and making workplaces safe. and and the organization has helped us in a way that we can put our views in a very constructive manner, and it is very well for us to like have our conversations in a meaningful way. And today, some of the members from our organization were in a meeting in the morning, and we will hold it in the later in the day for the tomorrow's event, which we are going to hold outside the same factory which burned 9 years ago. And tomorrow, I'm also giving a presentation tomorrow, and like it's going like this. And if
Thank you.
जिनको लेके चलने
Thank you,
का
Saeeda. That's very, very
तरीका
inspiring. Can you say something about reaching out with other organizations and creating ties with other groups and members of unions and other social movements to enhance worker safety elsewhere, not only because of their recent event in Karachi, but also in building a bigger front?
दिगर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से राफ्ता अगर मैं नहीं रखती और काम
Working with different organizations have been very helpful, and I think that without their help, we could not get what we have achieved so far. Like we are working with home-based workers, like who they are hidden workers because they have been seen in the factories. They work at their homes, but since we associated our organization with them and went on for a collective struggle, so it has been very useful working with different organizations. And it has been a very good relationship. We go in their programs, we participate in their meetings, and they come with us so that we can share ideas for better, uh, better, uh, better outcomes. And we discuss where what the workers in different industries are facing, what are the wages over there, whether they are registered with the social security and other pension institutions. So it has been a learning by conversing with uh, people from different organizations from different sectors. So it's like they are with us and we are with them. And if we talk about like international solidarity, we are very thankful to our German supporters, Miriam, especially Miriam, Thomas, and Chris, and some of the names I cannot recall currently. But all these people have helped us like we like belong from the same piece of cloth. We belong from the same community. So that was a sense of a human connection without race, without color, and that was the most beautiful thing in all this thing which I've learned so far. And if I speak about 2019, my visit to the European Union, uh, and it has been quite a learning for me that we are going in different parts of the world, telling our stories, raising, mustering support, not for only our justice, but for the workers across the globe, so that the world should know what is happening in the workspaces, and so that every worker should be safe, no matter in which part of the world they are. We have raised voice like every platform. I went to a German university to speak to students, and I was very happy to see their concerns about what kind of clothes they are wearing, where are they coming from, whether the workers who prepared those clothes for them were whether these clothes were not tainted with the blood of the workers who created them. So these concerns, I was very like impressed by these thoughts that young people.
रहेगा तब तक यानी कि ये मजदूर हमारे बच्चे इसी तरह कत्ल होते रहेंगे, कत्लगाह हर फैक्ट्री बनते रहेगी। हमें यानी कि इसलिए हमने अपने पाकिस्तान के अलावा हमने यूरोपियन कंट्री में भी जर्मन, इटली, जेनेवा यानी कि नेपाल, हमने हर कंट्री में जाकर ये आवाज उठाई जो हमें हमारे साथ होकर हमारी साथ ताउन करके जो हमें एक साथ होकर मुत्तहिद होकर जो हम हर फैक्ट्री सिर्फ कराची नहीं हर मुल्क के पूरी ऑल के मुल्क में यानी कि सेफ्टी का इंतजाम मजदूर की काम की जगह के सेफ्टी का इंतजाम जरूर किया जाए। इसलिए हमने यानी कि इन लोगों के साथ हुए और अपने ख्यालात का इजहार किया। अपना जो रीजन था हमारी जो हमारे जो दिल में थी सिर्फ हमारी कंपनसेशन नहीं था जो हम पैसा लेकर घर पे बैठ जाए। हमारी आवाज यही थी क्योंकि हमारे बच्चे बहुत यानी कि लफ्ते जिगर थे, हमारी जिंदगी थे।
सईदा बाजी एक मिनट रुकिएगा, सईदा बाजी एक मिनट रुकिएगा।
Yes, Zubair, we were all cut off maybe from a minute or so from what you said. Would you be so kind to also tell Saeeda that you will restate what she just said? And then I would like to give the floor to Nasir for a few minutes.
सईदा बाजी, आपने यहाँ पे एक टेक्निकल एरर था, अगर आपने जो भी बात की है वो दोबारा अगर आप बोलें तो मैं ट्रांसलेट कर सकूं, मेरा लैपटॉप बंद हो गया था।
किस जगह से?
As you, may I talk?
वहीं से
Would you hear me?
वो बाहर जाने वाली बातों से।
हाँ वहाँ से
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
जर्मन में जाकर, यानी कि जर्मन में जब गई वहाँ पर यूनिवर्सिटी में हमारी एक यानी कि इंटरव्यू रखा गया, मीटिंग रखा गया, करवाया गया। जे आज के जनरेशन जितने भी यूनिवर्सिटी के जो स्टूडेंट हैं तो वो भी सुने हमारी बातें, जहाँ हमारे मुल्क में किस तरह सानिया हुआ। तो हमने उन लोगों से, उन बच्चों से, उन स्टूडेंट से यही यानी बताया था, जब आप कपड़े पहनते हो, पैंट पहनते हो, जीन्स के टी शर्ट पहनते हो, तो ये चीज आप जो पहनते हो मना नहीं है, लेकिन आप इस चीज का गौर करो कि ये पैंट और टी शर्ट किसी मजदूर के खून से रंगे हुए तो नहीं है। किसी मजदूर ने इसको बनाते वक्त तो अपनी जान नहीं दी। तो ये चीज का आप बहुत ख्याल करो, क्योंकि आप आज के जनरेशन हो। इसके अलावा हमने यूरोपियन कंट्री भी गई हूँ 2019 में, जॉर्डन, जेनेवा भी गई हूँ, उसके बाद नेपाल भी गई हूँ, इटली भी गई हूँ, लेकिन हमारी आवाज यही थी, सिर्फ कंपनसेशन लेना नहीं था। हमारी आवाज थी ये मजदूर की काम की जगह, मजदूर की काम की जगह सेफ्टी हो, मजदूर की काम की जगह सेफ्टी हो। मजदूर जिस फैक्ट्री में काम करता है उस फैक्ट्री में एक बेल तो हो, जो कोई हादसा हुआ तो बेल यानी कि दबा दिया गया, सारे मजदूर नीचे आए। गेट खुली होना चाहिए, खिड़कियां यानी कि उस पोजीशन से बनी हो जो मजदूर निकल पाए, निकलने का जगह हो। लेकिन बहुत अफसोस की बात है,
Thank you very much.
पाकिस्तान में भी नहीं
Saeeda.
है।
सईदा बाजी,
Zubair, if you could be so kind to thank Saeeda very much for her contribution. The moderator always asks the wrong questions, for which she apologizes. And so, of course, you also now think of what else you would like to say. So while I hand over to the next panelist, Saeeda, please just think of what else you would like to contribute and what I forgot to ask you, which could be good. So now I cordially invite Nasir Mansoor to talk a little about the significance of the event from his perspective and from the perspective of his involvement with the National Trade Union Federation of Pakistan, and what the impact has been of the legal aftermath and the campaigns afterwards to change working conditions on the ground and transnationally. Thank you very much.
तो मैं बोल सकती हूँ, यानी
You
कल
have
की
to
बातें।
unmute yourself, Nasir, please. Just have to click on the little button.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, FES and ECCHR, for inviting us in the book launching ceremony, and we think that is a first attempt after 9 years that we are going to document the tragedy, the huge tragedy all over the world. So not only we are documenting the happening in the tragedy, but also the issues related with it, just like occupational health and safety issues, legal, different legal aspects of this issue. So here in Pakistan, there was a lot of discussion about it, and internationally also there was a discussion on it. And through this tragedy, the first thing was that the one unique thing was that as compared to Rana Plaza, it was that the victims organized themselves and they speak for their rights for themselves. They are pursuing their case themselves, and we, the trade union, labor right organizations, and people like Faisal Sidiqi, and Miriam and other organizations, they come to close with them and coordinate with them, and they show their solidarity with them. So they were the sole representative of themselves. They speak for themselves. That was a very unique experience over here in Pakistan. That, and other thing is that what we achieve is a number of things we achieve out of it. One thing is that we make it an international issue. And because of not only from the south, but from the north also, we have a very strong solidarity among the trade unions, labor right organization, legal, our labor experts. We combine together and we have one collective strategy, but with the different roles for each one. The trade union had played their own role, the labor organization, labor campaign organization, and our legal friends, they play a very important role into it, and we make it a very much a spoken and a discussed issue. So as a result, you see that in Pakistan, we have a occupational health and safety law. In a court of law, Faisal Sidiqi has filed a case on behalf of the victims. And first time in the last 30 years, the first time there was a criminal case against a local merchandiser, local supplier, and he was put behind bar. And because of he was put behind bar, and then the High Court has given a compensation and all other benefits and to the workers. And you see that because of that one, and then we have a courage to go to the Dortmund and we file a case in a German court, and through that court there was also a discussion in a Germany particularly, and in a Europe and North America is a special in particularly that they talked about it, and there was a discussion and what are the shortfalls in a legal framework in that country. So now we see that after that discussion, after 9 years, we get to know that in Germany there is one legislation is going to be passed which make accountable to the brands. So that is the most important thing. The other one important, what we get is that because of international solidarity, it was that in 100 years of ILO, it has a one convention, it's called a compensation convention of a 1-to-1. It was never invoked, but it's the first time that it was invoked, and through that instrument, through that compensation convention, the workers get a long-term compensation from the brands, and in that brand and that negotiation, the big names and high-ups of the German government also involved, different media groups and journalists, trade unionists, labor bodies, they involve in it and put pressure on a kick. So they come in a term with them, sit on the table and sign an agreement under the supervision of ILO, and we get more than $5 million for a long-term compensation. So I think that that is a very important, these are the aspects, but there are the shortfalls also. Shortfall is that local suppliers and the buyer, international buyer, they don't recognize, and then they didn't still not take their responsibility about the tragedy, and the courts fail to make them accountable. So justice is still not, we did still not get, but still we see that we get a lot of benefit out of it because of our struggle with the different directions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. If you allow me to just follow up, especially on this point that you just mentioned, the significance of being organized and being able to work within a union and to create links to unions elsewhere is one of the institutional features that is being fought over worldwide, and that's being fought against by corporate actors everywhere, so that you are able to use right now a union framework to advance these aims is really, really important. But the payment, the 5 million, of course, they are able to make concrete changes, but you said right away that if companies continue not to recognize their responsibility and courts continue to strike down these cases, then what would, in your formulation, be the ideal outcome? Would it be to show that one company, whether it's Kik or Gap or another company, is actually in a court held responsible, similarly to maybe the signal that the Cour de Cassation sent 2 days ago for Lafarge, by identifying a company and saying it's not enough to be far removed from the locale where the tort happens, but you are actually involved in what happens at your subsidiary or at your supplier's level. Do you think that's important, or is it going to come about legislative change? So the purposes of
yeah, one thing is that as we mentioned in the today we have one event on a book which was organized by Faisal Sidiqi Sahib in the evening, in the morning, and we talked about a lot about it. We think that there should be a binding treaties, legal binding treaties. Otherwise, all these instruments never work. We saw that there are ILO conventions. Pakistan has signed 38 conventions ratified by the Pakistani parliament, out of which 8 are core conventions. Pakistan get 10 years a special status, call it a GSP plus for European Union to reach to the European market, through which Pakistani products have nearly 0% duty on it. Before that special status, there was 9.5% duty on a Pakistani products. So Pakistan are fetching up more than €1 billion each year from that agreement, and every day they are improving their supply to the European Union. But 29 instruments are attached with that GSP plus, which include human rights and labor rights and respect the labor standards. But there is not a legal binding that one, and there is no monitoring system in it. So ILO convention or fail to respect the workers at a plant level. GSP plus don't work. We being a member of an industrial global union, we have a global framework agreement with the different brands, especially in textile and garments. But see, in Pakistan, not a single global framework agreement has changed a iota of anything at a plant level. So we think that a voluntarily kind of a mechanism never ever worked. So I think that when supply chain is a global one, and it is from north to south, no, sorry, the south to north, and from cotton fields to brands outlet and outlets in Europe, all over which we need that we have a uniform kind of labor standard which have a binding treaties. Otherwise, it can't work. You see that in Europe might be. I saw that workers in what you say that in services, in shops, in outlets, they get they have organizations, they have a good working relationship with the brands, and they are getting whatever they demand from them through their negotiations. But on the same level, the same brand, they don't allow the workers over here from where they are getting their merchandise. So I think that there should be some kind of if supply chains is a trans-border, so we have a trans-border legal binding kind of a mechanism. Then it will we make a corporate more responsible to not only to the north but also to the south. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nasir. I hope that everybody has heard loud and clear element about the importance of continuing to support institutions and institutional frameworks such as unions, because they are often treated almost as a luxury and unnecessary in the global north, and fight very hard for their survival. And to see how they can be put to work on a transnational basis is really crucial in this context. So allow me to hand over now to Faisal Sidiqi, and then afterwards to Miriam, in order now to focus, and I do that semi-pedagogically as well, because there's a lot of law students who have joined us today, And I think both Faisal and Miriam can tell us a little about what it means concretely to advance a legal strategy and how these legal strategies look, in fact, very different from what one learns in law school, because they're more inclusive, they're more sophisticated, they include different elements that don't just are narrowed down to a litigation process before court, but have to do a lot of with organization on the ground and what that means to do transnationally. So maybe Faisal, if you could be so kind to say a few words about your involvement and how to launch a legal campaign and how you then started collaborating with the center in Berlin, that would be much appreciated.
Well, Pierre, that's a very long story. So I'll, try to tell it in a few sentences. I mean, my involvement started when I saw the fire on TV. I mean, it was really a traumatic experience. I couldn't sleep for a number of days. And what worried me then is what worries me now, is why is it happening in the 21st century? Why is it happening? It is something which happened at the beginning of the 20th century. We have the example of the Triangle Fire, and you see identical elements why deaths occur. I mean, it is a replica. The sealed windows, the sealed doors, the unaccountability of the owners, no fire and safety. And that is the question which I raised then and I raise now. It's a question which I've tried to answer in my article. I mean, we really didn't know at that time what to do. I mean, we filed a case in the High Court, which was not the traditional route. It was a judicial review petition in the High Court. I mean, any law student would know that in such cases, you go and file tort claims, which are civil suits. But civil suits in these circumstances were not possible. We couldn't even locate the victims. We didn't know how many people had died. We didn't know where the legal heirs was. The victims were so afraid that when we filed the initial petition, we couldn't get a single family to file the petition. It is only people like Nasir and Karamat who came forward, who became petitioners themselves, that we were able to file the petition. And, then as the petition began, then we, of course, met this very interesting person called Miriam, who, when there was a near war going on in Karachi, used to visit areas in Karachi which I didn't used to go to. So our fascination with ECCHR started with our fascination with Miriam. And I think she and Caroline were the formidable, I mean, you always have these very inspiring individuals who really spur it and who have this patience, energy, and who are in the struggle long term. And, year by year, she was on it, although she knows that I was completely against filing these cases in the German courts, but in her determination, she convinced everyone, filed that. And it was a parallel effort which was going on. We were proceeding with our cases in Pakistan. They were building up their case in Germany. Both of that came together when the ILO negotiations took place. As we document in our book, what really comes out of this litigation, at least that is what we thought at that time, is that at least a substantive compensation was paid out because of both these parallel efforts. And I don't think the ILO award would have been possible unless this mobilization in Germany and Europe had taken place. Although Kik never mentioned this, but I don't think they were afraid of what was going on in Pakistan. They were really afraid of what was going on in Germany. They were afraid of the German government, and Miriam would know better. I know some facts that, the German government really pushed KIK to come to a settlement. So, I mean, that is this, even if you look at the ILO settlement, on paper, you will not find the anything which links KIK to the mobilization in Germany. They will never admit that they settled at the ILO because of this mobilization in Germany, because of the lawsuit in Germany. The lawsuit was dismissed. I mean, on the face of it, they had nothing to fear. There was no liability. So there was no reason to settle. So, this is a short story of how these two struggles come together. But I think even after writing the article, if you give me a minute, I think something very strange happened in the morning, which really surprised me. In our book launch in the morning, we had the senior most judge of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, Justice Maqbool Bakar, who gave the keynote address, which is very unusual. Nobody bothers about labor law. So he was kind enough to come to this. And of course, he gave a speech, which I will share with you, which is really a charge sheet against the state, both in terms of its national and international commitment, which is very strange, surprising for a sitting judge. But then he did something which told me what the Baldia factory fire had done. When Saeeda Khatoon had made her speech, and it was a very emotional speech, when she was going back, the judge stood up and she saluted Saeeda Khatoon and said, "I'm sorry, when I was making my speech, I did not acknowledge you when I acknowledged everyone in the hall, and please accept my acknowledgement for your struggle." I mean, that reaction on an emotional level, to me, points to that glimmer of hope, which is the real change which is required, which is a change on an intellectual and cultural level, where labor rights become as important as gender rights. They don't become a right which is at number 51 of the human rights list. That is what has happened in Pakistan. So they are at the bottom of the list. Even rights like occupational safety, even minimum wages. So maybe Miriam has always been more optimistic, but maybe what I saw today points towards at least a recognition to the right to life when it comes to labor rights in the intellectual narrative in Pakistan. I see that happening as a result of this recent fire also. When the Baldia factory fire happened, the employers were on this aggressive aggression that, oh, it's a sabotage, there's nothing wrong with the factories. That is, 9 years ago. But this fire, the Employers Federation came up with a statement where they said, close down all the factories which don't have occupational safety and health conditions. These factories which are built on residential plots should be banned, which I think could not be envisaged except in the aftermath of the Baldia factory fire. So maybe something is changing in these power structures where you have these judges saying these things, making these gestures, maybe these employer association, maybe there is a window of opportunity. But in order to avail that window of opportunity, I think creative legal thinking is required, like creative mobilization thinking is required. In terms of creative legal thinking, you have to go beyond the traditional tort claim framework. In terms of mobilization thinking, you have to think beyond national boundaries, like we thought in this case. but more important, not to think beyond the mere demand of unionization. I think you have to think beyond this. I think there are other people's other civil society organizations which can be mobilized. I think the law and judges are an underutilized element in this struggle. They have to be creatively, used and mobilized. So at least, these are early 20th century problems: occupational safety, minimum wages, right to representation. These are not 20th, even late 20th century problems or 21st century problems. So, I mean, these are my initial thoughts. I'm sorry I've taken a bit more time.
No, it doesn't matter. It's very, very important what you said. And forgive me if I asked, not other questions. You take the next few minutes to think of what else you would like to add. I would like to ask now Miriam, another collaborator who makes us all realize that days have 40 hours and not just 24. And if I could just ask you to talk about two things a little in a few minutes, which is one, the role that your organization plays in facilitating, empowering, assisting, vocalizing, and visualizing such engagements. And at the same time, if you could say a quick word also in your role as adjunct professor, how to make lawyers, young lawyers, to see how they can get involved in such work. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Per. Of course, I also want to thank FES for making this event also possible with us, and for my wonderful panelists, which I haven't seen in due to COVID in more than 1.5 years. I probably want to first start briefly talking also about the aim of this book. And I think we've heard from the others about this remarkable cooperation that has evolved around this tragic fire. And I felt that there has been such an interesting and very fruitful discussion, but also really developing strategies together, not always necessarily, Faisal, you said I convinced people to file the kick case, but I felt it was a mutual discussion about what would be the best steps to support the struggle for the victims, to also potentially use legal avenues in Germany, next to the negotiation strategies that were also laid out and developed by the Pakistani unions and organizations and the Affectees Association. And so I felt it is important to document this thinking that we all had, and to really show also to a wider public that it's not just about one case that is either filed in Pakistan or one case that is filed in Germany, but that there's so much more collaboration happening, which actually probably will more likely lead to the change, or the social change that we would want to see. And that's why we have been especially also asked to use, to use the form of an academic book, but in its first part to have interviews with Saeeda Khatoon, so that she herself can be part of the discussion internationally, so that her voice can be heard, that Nasir's, Mansoor's thinking can be heard, that Faisal, Sidiqi's and my reasoning is heard. And then also, of course, that we have academics comment on this, because they can, I think the role of academics often is also to, to further, to develop even, to further develop ideas, to bring in new questions. And so I'm very glad that this has come together, but we also, it also shows that there have been artists working on this case and making this visible in a different way. As well as there have been journalists had a crucial role in this, and so we also have one journalist being, speaking about his work in this. So, and I think that's probably also where it comes then probably to the law students. I do hope that through this publication, a wide range of people, both law students in the global north, but also either law students in the global south or activists, can understand and say, okay, there are different ways in how law can be used in an unusual and progressive way. And I think that comes probably to the thinking of ECCHR about how we believe the use of law can work. And that is, I think, to say that we at ECCHR, when ECCHR was founded, it was clear ECCHR wants to challenge powerful actors, the powerful European state actors that are involved in back then crimes, for example, committed in Iraq, in Afghanistan, so in war crimes, crimes against humanity. But we also, and then you look at the other side, where do European actors are seriously harming human rights? That are corporations, that is in the production sites, elsewhere outside of the EU, in global supply chains. And then, of course, the next step is to look, so what is the accountability mechanisms for such corporations? And if you look into those transnational global connections, there is no real accountability, approach. There is no international criminal court that you could go to. There is no European Court for Human Rights that would have jurisdiction, particularly over this kind of involvement of corporations. And if you look at this also, and I think that's also what we found very important, if you look at the role of law in those constellations, law helps companies to externalize their responsibilities, because things that used to be happening in production sites that were their own, where you are covered by labor law that to some extent creates responsibilities of large multinationals. By externalizing this into supply chains through contract law, there is no obligation anymore. And so our legal strategy was, we need to reverse this. We felt that this is what, also as a European organization, should be our aim, that we want to reverse responsibility and put responsibility back onto the European corporations. And so this has been the whole legal thinking and theory, which we chose the form of tort law. And we developed some thinking there and some discussions there, and some legal arguments. So, but in the end, it's really about putting back the responsibility. And another aspect that I also see in our cases, and I think both Nasir but also Saeeda spoke about this, that I find that a way of the way we have been using law, legal procedures, but also activism in this case is, it is important in a globalized world that the voices of those persons in the production countries are being heard and can intervene into political debates also here. And so they can intervene into German courts, and they can force a German company to hire an expensive lawyer and to listen and sit to their case and to respond to their case. But then also the next thing is, in which I'm immensely grateful to Nasir and Saeeda, that they have been so willing to support the legal campaign for a supply chain law. With all its shortcomings, it has in the end. But I think this has been a very important actor, because you so genuinely were speaking for this. You've also, as Saeeda said, she appeared before the European Parliament and spoke about the need for such laws, for such legislation. And I think that is something that needs to happen much more often, but which is important, because we need to understand that making decisions about certain laws and about certain responsibilities here in Germany and Europe does not only affect a German or European population, it affects many more people, and those people need to have a voice in those processes on how to decide about this.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Now I invite questions from our participants near and far, and you could, I think we could just start by a few, because we can't see everybody here at the same time. If you could just unmute yourself, say your name, and say you would like to ask a question, that would be perfect, or you write your name into the chat, and then I will just call on you. So the floor is open, and please feel free to ask our panelists to comment on issues that you care about. This is your time now. And yes, Marcus, go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much, Per, FES, and colleagues from Pakistan and ECCHR for this wonderful event. My name is Marcus Grzewski. I'm professor of law at the University Erlangen-Nuremberg, and I've been one of the editor of the series where the book appeared. So I'm very proud that this book is part of our series. My question actually is a repetition pair, of the question that you asked Miriam, the second question, I'd be interested as a university professor in the global north, what is it that we can do when we teach our law students? And I would specifically be interested in hearing from maybe the colleagues from Pakistan, what message they think we should convey, and also maybe what teaching formats we should be using so that this message that you brought to us in the book and also in this book launch is a message that also will be sort of sent to the younger generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for your question. I received another question from Richard Yander at McGill, who wants to have the panel, who invites the panelists to reflect a little on what impact the book, similarly to Marcus' question and concern, what impact the book can have on the ongoing engagement in such law reform and litigation strategies. I think we should field maybe a couple of more questions, and then I hand over to the panelists, because that way we don't risk of not having more questions from the podium. So are there any other questions, please? What I do in the classroom is that I lean forward and say, oh, come on, can't be that you're all on Facebook right now. And then my students say, nobody's on Facebook anymore. So what are your questions, dear friends and colleagues? If you don't ask a question, you cannot have an answer. Okay, so then for now, maybe Nasir and Saeeda, maybe you could say what you think in terms of whether a book like this and an event like this, what message that could send and what you would hope the impact it could have. Maybe we start with you, Saeeda.
जी ये बुक हर तरह से हमें
This book is really helpful for us. As I have said before, if it is available in Urdu, then it will be very helpful for the local people here to understand it, read it, and take inspiration from it, because everything is documented in this book. All the struggles of the local activists, of the international activists, of law, of everything. And I believe this will really impact the local community here if it is available in Urdu. That's all.
Thank you very much. Nasir, what are your thoughts?
I think that after 9 years, now we have one well-documented whole thing about the tragedy, and that book show that not only to the south but for the north, that the working conditions still not change over here, and we are still discussing what was happened at the day of 11th September. So that book always remind the brands, governments, and the legislators and employers that things must be changed if they want that the worker should work in a procedural ways and in a peaceful, in a harmonic way. Otherwise, there would be a revolts everywhere. Now in Pakistan, more than 70% workers in a textile sector are less than in an age of 40. So they don't know about labor laws. They don't know about any movement. They have their own way to tackle their issues. They don't believe in labor courts. legislators, labor departments, they restore to violence, resistance, strikes. So that way of reacting has been increasing day by day. So we think that it is a time that we should look into the root cause of the issue. And the issue is that at workplace, workers don't have minimal rights which were granted to them even 100 years ago. As the Faisal says that we are still discussing and we are still negotiating the rights which we have gotten in Europe and other industrialized countries 100 years ago. So it's very problematic for us. So that book is also discussing that one. So I think that it's a time that we should have some kind of workable mechanism to, in real terms, treated workers as social partners. So if they treat them not a social partner, they will be a social counterpart. When they become a social counterpart, they go for a resistance and a confrontational ways. So there is an inbuilt problem in it that capital don't want any kind of restriction on it, and the labor want that capital should be restricted through the laws and legislation, and that a problem are going on. And whenever the worker get their some kind of voice through organize, they will make them accountable. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I cannot help thinking that we speak to the choir here among those that have signed in and that participate in this event. And the aspect that, and I think Faisal expressed it so powerfully when he said, how can that be that we are struggling with the same issues, the concrete events that have already put social legislation and worker-oriented legislation on the floor more than 100 years ago? How can that just continue as if nothing of these things had happened before? If we take that history matters perspective seriously, then I think one could step out of this circle of being just campaigning amongst oneself and trying to make change, but also make maybe a contribution to a much wider awareness. Because what's very, very exhausting for all of you who are so actively involved in these strategies and campaigns is that you work day and night and you achieve goals, but you are it's often outside of the mainstream. The mainstream might hear about this, read a critical Guardian article, might actually click on one of the websites or find a social media reference and then feels bad, but then just moves on. And I wonder how one can build a bridge between the concrete work that you do and the daily lives of people that right now are so aware that politics matter, but they're also more insecure than ever on how to actually get involved and what to do and where to make one's own contribution. So I hand over to Richard Yander from McGill for 1 second for another question, and then I hand over to Miriam. Richard, you're on. Richard, you have to unmute yourself, I think.
I apologize, Pat.
Yes.
I thought I would just put the question.
We can't hear you, Richard.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I apologize.
No.
No.
It says you're unmuted, but still we can't hear you.
Yeah. Perhaps you could just read my question.
No, still not. I don't know why.
He's on the wrong channel, I think.
We can see you.
He's on the general channel.
Yeah.
But his question has been in the chat.
Very good. Okay, good. I hand it over to Miriam. Miriam, did you see Richard's question in the chat? Okay, Miriam, the floor is yours. Thank you, Richard. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Well, probably one to your remark, Pierre, but also to and to this previous question on how to make this visible. Well, I think this book, obviously, well, one very practical thing is, at least it's, while it is an academic book, which is not very accessible necessarily, or even less, it is open source, which was one of the criteria to actually choose a publishing house, that it can be open source, so that it's easier to be distributed. I think the next hope is that I think it is that just by the way it has been made, and that it gives voices to people who normally are not part of those kind of books, that this reaches a certain audience, obviously one that is quite academically educated, because otherwise you wouldn't read a book. So super grassroots organizers likely will not have access. But then the next important step is that it will be translated to Urdu. So I think this is all about accessibility. But I think what it does, it strengthens the actors that have been involved in this, because it gives access to people to an international audience that that normally is not having access to. So I think that in itself, I do believe that there's a discursive element that will matter, and that will bring some movement, and that hopefully, for example, inspires. I think that's to the students' question. I think students need to be inspired and simply see what is possible. I can't tell a student how to start their own, social justice litigation. This will be dependent on where you are, what matter you come across. But the question is, and I think that's what this whole book should be inspiring, is to law school teaches you to always think within the box, and to go along either the legal text or the commentaries or the jurisprudence. But what you need to do is you need to think out of the box, and you need to think creatively. I think that's probably, and also not only legally, but also to see many more other aspects to this. And yes, as I said, this French law is spreading currently in Europe. So the German supply chain law that I referred to, for which the case against the retailer KIK has been crucial, is a replication of this French law. It looks different because Germany is a different, it's simply also a different jurisdiction. And it has some downsides, but the French law also has downsides. So it is exactly that. And what is currently very intensely debated at the European level is to create a European-wide regulation that creates supply chain responsibilities of companies doing business in Europe. So in Germany already, this law applies also to US or Canadian companies if they have substantial business presence in Germany. So I think this is definitely in Europe. It's a trend which has been seriously I think, pushed also by this Pakistani case.
Very good. Thank you so much, Miriam. Faisal.
Yes, I think let me just combine the two questions about, there was a question about what students can be taught in terms of this case, the lessons from this case at the university level. What are the lessons from this? As well as this question about this French legislation. I think one of the central problems which, since I've also studied in England, one of the central problems I faced while applying what I learned abroad while being in Pakistan is that there are two main differences in terms of how law operates in countries like Pakistan. So there are two presumptions which you make in North America or in Europe, which you cannot make in Pakistan. The first presumption is that you have a functional state, or you have a relatively neutral state. You have a state in Europe which has all the elements of a classical state. It has administrative reach, it has monopoly over coercive power, it has a level of administrative competence, and it has legitimacy. These things are missing in countries like Pakistan. So whatever law you pass, whether it's an international treaty or that is adopted by Pakistan, or whether it's a national law, now those laws or treaties or ILO conventions might look very beautiful on the paper, but because of a state which is completely compromised, or at another level, it's really not a functional state in terms of providing services, that law makes no difference. Now, that's a presumption which is made abroad, that if you have a law, that will be implemented. That is a presumption you cannot make in Pakistan. So the legislative route to reform is not possible in a country like Pakistan. The second presumption which you make is that the law in books to a large extent corresponds with the law in action. You can't make that presumption in Pakistan. There is what I call in my article an anarchy of the law in Pakistan, where actually benefits are gained both by the implementation and the non-implementation of the law. So we were very lucky that the regressive law regarding labor rights was not fully implemented in the Baldia factory fire case in Pakistan. If it was, we would have got no compensation. It is because of the anarchy in the law, the disjunction between law in books and law in action, that we got compensation, which frankly was not due under the law. So you have to think beyond, as Miriam said, think beyond these neat notions about legislative change, having a welfare state. These things don't work, and I don't see them working in the near future. So waiting for more unionization, waiting for a reform of the state really is not going to stop these fires in the short run. People are going to be killed, every 5 years, every 6 years. We started seeing that in Bangladesh. So that's the first point. The second point, very quickly, is, this book is important in terms of the complete, what I called the desert of labor narrative in Pakistan. I mean, there is just no documentation of struggles of labor rights in Pakistan. I mean, Baldia factory fire gave birth to one of the very few monuments to martyrs of labor rights in Pakistan. If you have such an intellectual domination of the capitalist elite, of the mainstream dominant, I mean, how can you expect anyone to take labor rights seriously? So this, in a sense, breaks that dominant narrative, that intellectual narrative. I mean, it's a paradox that the book launch today was held at the IBA. What is the IBA? The IBA is the Institute of Business Administration. It is the leading business school in Pakistan. So for a labor rights book to enter into IBA is some kind of a breakthrough in terms of at least breaking this narrative where labor is the other. It is absent. Nobody talks about it. It's irrelevant. It's not an issue in the 21st century. So, I mean, I think that is the first impact of the book. The second impact, very quickly, I hope, at least that is how I look at the book. I read Miriam's article, I read the other articles, and it makes me now think about, because we are in the process of now initiating litigation on this August tragedy, where 16 people were burnt alive. Now, this book has really helped me to really think about the huge mistakes, and I admit to that, at least to my extent, which I made in the first litigation, where it could have been more effective, where it could have led to preventing further fires, to a better implementation of the law. Now, this book has really helped me to, because I've documented the mistake, not to make those mistakes again. So it's that's the importance, even in terms of future legal strategies or legal struggles. Documentation is key because it involves moving from an activist frame to an academic frame and reflecting on both your successes, your mistakes, the gravity of the problem, and how to develop a future strategy.
Thank you very, very much. I really want to sincerely thank Saeeda, Faisal, Nasir, and Miriam, and all our guests today for this event. And very grateful. I hand over to Miriam, who will send you on your merry ways.
Thank you, Per. Yes, I also want to thank Faisal. I want to thank Nasir, Saeeda, and Per for this presentation, but also all others. I want to thank Michael Bader, who has also edited this book, as well as Palvasha Shahab. And of course, you know, Marcus, who's made this also this possible, the FAS. And I have one last thought that I want to bring to Faisal to leave us. I think Faisal well described that also law and litigation and to use it in an active, like together with activism and struggles. I think we need to also understand law as a tool of intervening. So it's not something, it's an intervention which makes sense at a certain point in time with a certain method. And we need to be creative and wise and also political about which method makes sense at which point in time. And yes, so I do hope very much that this book will, and I'm very proud that it was also presented today in Pakistan, which I think even before us now, which is very important. And I do believe and I do hope that this will also lead us to further cooperations, Nasir and Saeeda and Faisal. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And Miriam, the eternal optimist, I must say.
I know, that's our
Thank you.
controversy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nasir.
All of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
ये बंद करें, ये बंद ही कर दें। उन्होंने कहा है जे आप बोलिएगा जे बंद कर दे सुबैर को, और ये भी बंद कर दीजिए।
Die Aufnahme ist jetzt gestoppt.
Super, danke.
Sehr gut.
Okay.
Soll ich die restlichen TeilnehmerInnen entfernen, dass ihr sprechen könnt? Oder soll ich euch eine Breakout-Gruppe einrichten?
Ich glaube, wir haben gar nichts mehr zu besprechen. Oder?
Okay.
Also.
Passt.
Oder? Also gibt es noch.
Ich war sehr glücklich, als Nasir dann richtig zu hören war.
Ja.
Nachdem das am Anfang so Trouble gegeben hat mit Saeeda und der Übersetzung. Ne? Ich glaube, das war aber tatsächlich die Internetverbindung bei den beiden.
Sorry guys, there was some issue in my laptop.
Vielleicht so Bayer mit uns.
Dying again and again.
Ich weiß nicht.
Right. So where are you talking to us? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
No.
No?
Yes. I can.